my name is Rachel and I'm here today to do a review of Call Me By Your Name by André Aciman. This is a book that I read for the Queer Lit Readathon. I started it in the morning and was finished with it before I went to bed. And I went to work that day and I didn't have it on audiobook. I just didn't stop reading it until I'd finished it. So I think that says in itself how much I enjoy this book. I love this book. I gave it 5 stars. I think it's one of the best books I've read this year actually, and I don't do many reviews of books and I tend to only review books that I have very strong feelings towards. My feelings towards this are ridiculously strong right now, so I decided to make a review of it. So if you don't know, this is a book about a young man called Elio. So he lives with his family in Italy. I think he's Italian American, and basically his family invites people who are working or studying or writing or anything like that to stay with them. They stay with them for like 6 weeks of summer, and it's kind of like a focused retreat for them. So say they work at a university, they'd be able to write papers. Say they were writing novels, they'd be able to just sit and write every day. So that is kind of the basis of this book. So Oliver, the man who comes to stay, is 24 and Elio is 17. He is the child of this family, and they basically get very close and strike up a relationship, and that is the basis of this book. We basically follow their summer together, and then we get some information about years down the line after that. So obviously, like I said, I read this all in one day and I finished it around 9 o'clock at night. And then I put the movie on straight away, which I think was a bit of a disservice to the movie because the movie couldn't compare to the book because it was so fresh in my mind. So the first thing that I adored about this book, and it's probably the reason that I loved it so much, is the writing style. So we are told everything from Elio's point of view, the 17-year-old. The whole thing is an inner monologue, so it kind of works that he talks to his feelings, he talks to his thoughts, he does all of that stuff, and then it kind of slots in his memories of certain times throughout his discussion of feelings and thoughts. Oh my god, it's so well done, it's so well written. If you have ever looked into like writing advice or anything like that, André Aciman goes against all of that. Like, this is a paragraph that goes all the way here and onto the next page. There are paragraphs that are basically the entire 2 pages of like when you open a book, and his sentences are so long. His sentences can be an entire paragraph sometimes, and it's kind of the thing that you are advised against if you ever look into writing advice, as they say, like, it trips readers up and it needs to be more simple, more accessible for readers. But André Aciman basically was like, fuck that, wrote it how he wanted to, wrote it with all these long sentences and long paragraphs, but it works so well because it's an inner monologue, and this boy is kind of obsessed with Oliver, and so his like obsessive mindset goes really well with how long the paragraphs are, because it's like the paragraphs and sentences themselves are so long because they reflect his obsession. Like, oh my god, it was just, I loved it. I loved the writing style so much. It was phenomenal. And another thing that he did is if people were having a conversation, their conversation occurred in the same paragraph, so it was kind of, there'd be like reported speech, and he wouldn't start new paragraphs for people's responses, which obviously is the way people normally write, but it worked so well because it kept it fresh. It didn't have that constant he said, she said, he said, she said. It just flowed really well, and it meant that conversations moved faster and they kept you with them, which I haven't seen done very often, or at least I haven't seen it done very well. Also, something I adored was that there are a lot of foreign languages in this book. So there's Italian, there's French, there might be some Spanish, I can't remember. So my copy is obviously English, but he weaves in these foreign languages because obviously we're in Italy, there's parts where we're in Rome. He weaves in people's actual language, and he will just slot translations in without drawing attention to them. And the other thing that he does is sometimes he doesn't translate the foreign language, he just kind of leaves it for you to interpret, because you kind of have enough information to gauge what they're saying, but he doesn't translate it perfectly, so it kind of gives you more freedom as a reader to interpret what's going on and makes it more like you're a part of the story and you're a part of how this story moves, which is just beautiful. And then the last thing about the writing style, so I'm going to stop in a minute, is that when they were in Rome, I felt like it had this like feel of like Fitzgerald's writing, of that like the late night party that never ends, with creative people just digressing on any sort of topic and just drinking whatever alcohol they can find. Like, it just kind of feels like aged, but at the same time it feels timeless and just perfect. It just felt really good. I really enjoyed it. So moving on to the actual story of the book, one of the things that I really enjoyed was that there's a lot of honesty in this book. Elio, our narrator, is constantly like completely head over heels in love with someone, and then he hates them, and then he's in love with someone else, and then he's like, oh, I can't even think about them when I'm with this person, and blah 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 blah. Like, he's just so all over the place. But it was so representative at the time of him being like, he's 17, he's a teenager, these are his first relationships, and you kind of see him be all over the place, but you can kind of understand it, like that is what a teenager is. And yeah, like with the inner monologue and the narrative and all of that coming together, it just worked so perfectly. Also loved that there is representation of familial acceptance of somebody being gay. So a lot of the time you don't get this. People are constantly not accepted and all of that sort of stuff in everything else I read. For the Queer Lit Readathon, I think we had families that didn't accept the kids because they were gay, and I understand why. I understand that, number one, that is a thing that happens all the time. Number two, drama, you know, it's a book, you want tension, you want drama, and I get that. But it also is really important to see people who have accepting families and know that you can be accepted for who you are. So it was really nice in this to have a really accepting, positive experience for someone who was gay. So that was a really great thing about this book that I really enjoyed. And then the last thing is that I really adored this idea of unity, and I really thought that it worked in the book. So one thing that I have mentioned a lot and done very long reviews of is Wuthering Heights. And the thing that I love in Wuthering Heights, even though I know that it's weird and I get that, but it's this uniting of people. So there's scenes where Kathy says he's more myself than I am. There's scenes where they talk about being one with each other, and Heathcliff wants to be buried without the edges on their coffins so that their bones can mingle together and become one. It's weird, but it's something that I really enjoy because I just think it's so reflective of how much you love someone to be just want to be so intermingled with them. I think it really represents how extremely someone feels these emotions by having these thoughts and these feelings and wanting that. So there is obviously the scene with Call Me By Your Name, where that whole thing comes from, that whole title, which I really enjoyed. I thought it was a really cool concept, and I remember at the time thinking, this is really like Wuthering Heights in that thing that I enjoy, that uniting of two people and two bodies and spirits and all of that sort of stuff. And then towards the end, he mentions Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights, and he mentions it in passing, but I was like, he did this on purpose. I'm not just noticing it. It's something that he did on purpose and weaved through the book, which I thought was fantastic. I loved it, and I know there are a lot of scenes that people find disturbing or too sexual or all of those things in this book, but I didn't find them to be that. Of course, there were times when I was like, I wouldn't make that choice personally, but I could understand why the author had them doing it, and I just thought it worked so well in illustrating their relationship and what that relationship was to each other. So I really enjoyed that idea of unity and the way that that was shown, although I know that a lot of people have hated it. If you have made a review of Call Me By Your Name, just on a side note, link it down below, because I couldn't find reviews by anyone that I knew or that I watched on BookTube about Call Me By Your Name, because every time you type it in, there's just so many reviews coming up, I think because it was such a famous movie and because it was controversial, and there's just a million little pictures coming up going, oh my god, the beach scene, oh my god, the beach scene, oh my god, the beach, like over and over and over again. And it kind of infuriated me because it was just simplifying something that I thought was done so like intricately and done really well, so it kind of annoyed me, and I was like, I'm not even looking for people anymore. But if you have made a review, please leave it down below, because I would like to see it, because I don't actually know many people's thought on this book that isn't negative, which is a shame because I think it's wonderful. So yeah, there are my thoughts on the book. It's 100% going to feature on my favourite books of the year. I don't know why, because I haven't actually looked at what books I read this year or at what could be a favourite, but this will definitely be up there. And the last thing I wanted to do was just discuss the film a little bit. The film version of Call Me By Your Name, there were two things that stood out that I really enjoyed, so I'm going to talk about those first. So the first one is Elio. I thought the actor that they picked to play Elio, he wasn't how I imagined Elio in my head, but I think he did a really perfect job of being him and of getting his feelings across to me, and that really worked. He was a good Elio character. And the other thing that I found really good is that it wasn't Americanized, it wasn't this big American thing, it still had this international indie type of feel to it, which I think lent itself really well to the book. And along with that, it also still kept the same feelings as the setting. Like, the setting was different from how it was described in the book, but it was also different in a good way. Like, I liked the changing in setting and it didn't annoy me. So that was really good. And then it also kept the language and the ambiguity of it going in between languages. If you didn't have subtitles on, you wouldn't have been able to decipher what some of this film was talking about. And I liked that because it still had this thing that the book had of this magic of like weaving itself between languages, which I thought was really, really well done. Having said that, I don't think the film managed to capture the magic of the book because we didn't have this inner monologue. The book is, we know everything that Elio's thinking and everything that he's feeling, and because we didn't have that in the film version, it really affected the whole thing negatively and just meant that it didn't come across as well. And I think that it meant that this like oneness that I loved so much about the book, it didn't come through successfully because we didn't have that inner monologue to know what it meant. My biggest annoyance with the film was the casting of Oliver. I'm not very good at guessing ages, but to me, the guy who played Oliver in the film looked about 35. It made it creepy. In the books, I didn't find the age gap weird at all. Like 17 and 24, that's not so big an age gap to me. And when someone's 24, they're still quite young. They can still like go on nights out, they can still do all these things. And I know obviously you can do that when you're 35. But my point is, like, it's not close to 17. Like, it's a lot older, and they made it creepy. They made that age difference bigger. And I think they did that to kind of serve the purpose of making it seem weirder, making it seem more like a teacher and a student, which is not what it felt like to me reading the book. So I really did not enjoy the casting of Oliver at all. And then the last thing that I disliked about the film was the decision to change the end of the book when they go traveling. So in the book, they go traveling, they go to Rome, they meet all these people in Rome, and they have this, you know, moment that I described before where there's all these artists who are drinking together and digressing on just random topics, and it's just so timeless and so well written, and I loved it so much. And in the film, they completely changed it. They go to some like countryside place and they're just like milling around doing nothing, and it took all of the magic out of that, and I really didn't enjoy that. I thought the trip to Rome was so much better in the book, and it was kind of just a letdown in the film. Like, it was such a letdown when it showed Oliver getting the train. I was just like, is that supposed to be the trip from the book? Because that's nothing like it. Like, it was just, yeah. I just think the film just could not capture the book in any way, shape or form, and so I could never have been happy with it. So they are my thoughts. This gets 5 stars. The film gets, I'd probably say 3 stars because I still think it's well done, but it's just not great. So yeah, I love this and you should read it. It's fantastic. Thank you very much for watching. Comment down below if you've read this book and what your thoughts were, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!